Welcome everyone. This is a new trial of a system of training events online prior to the British Open Paramotor Championships, with specific regard in today's case to general introduction to the tasks and the task planning and the type of maps we use and some strategies to approach planning for them. Delighted to see so many of you here. It's really overwhelming to see so much uptake and interest in the national championships this year. It's fantastic, and we're looking forward to a brilliant competition. And one of the things that we really want to do around that, and kind of in line with our general philosophy of paramotor competition being about improving pilots and an educational experience that gets you ultimately to go away being a better, safer and more skilled pilot at the end of the event. We also don't want people, particularly newer pilots, to come in there and feel that they're just sort of sent out into the blue with a map and not much of a clue where they're going, and a bit of fear and a bit of uneasiness and out of comfort zone. So we figure the more we can do this end of it, with some time in advance for you to go out to your field, have a look at your maps, play with them in between now and then, do some simulations, the better. It's the first time we've done this online, so bear with us if we sort of a little bit not as smooth as we might be. We hope to get better. But broadly speaking, this will be what I would normally do as kind of the second half of the first on-site briefing of the competition. The first half is the kind of official safety overview of the site, stuff that we need to know. We will publish in advance, but we kind of need to know that we've told everybody again on site, and that's what I will do 2 weeks from now, again in advance, and again to a slight degree on site on the day, on the first briefing on the Wednesday evening, but most of that will be 2 weeks from today. The second half, then we would normally, those that we'd give out the maps, the more experienced pilots that want to just dash off to their tents and start scribbling over maps and planning can do so. But those who are newer to it, we would then spend another hour or two going through the task catalogue, task types and the strategies to plan for it. That all gets quite late. We deliberately start the first briefing on site at 8 so that people can leave work and not take so much time off work and get there. So we're trying to kind of advance all of that by a couple of most of the important info online in advance this year, so that we can have a much shorter briefing on that first night, give out the maps, make sure you're all there, and then you can get cracking with planning and get a reasonably good night's sleep before a great day of competition. Any questions so far? I suppose, well, the final one is to for those who haven't met me face to face before, you know who I am by now. I'm Barney. I have a fairly long history of being involved in paramotor competitions through competing and then being part of the committee directing since 2017. And I'm delighted that what we've got to, the point we've got to this year is really what I've been working towards for 5 years now, with the team around me and the committee. We're at a fantastic point, a really big comp, loads of new faces, and if you're feeling new today and a bit not sure of what you're doing, you could be next year's standing on the podium as the British champion. You never know. A year today, a year this year to get feel for it, a year of practice, and then a year of smashing it. Dan Jones knows what I'm talking about because he's been there and done it. So I'll move on to on the intros to key people here. To Dan. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dan. Hopefully we've got all the audio issues sorted out. I've been flying for coming up to 4 years now. I've put some dedicated time into flying comps, and that's kind of what I've fallen in love with, and that's the style of flying I do. I'm now the treasurer for the committee.
Sorry, Dan, excuse me 1 moment. I have a child wailing. Pass on to Andy Shaw after you finish.
Yeah, will do. Yeah, now the treasurer for the committee, so helping get all these comps up, and it's really amazing actually seeing the comp grow over the sort of 3 years that I've actually been doing it, to the point it is today. So glad you're all here and willing to learn some stuff and have a bit of fun. Really, that's kind of what it's all about. You know, that's why I've fallen in love with comps. It sort of gives you something to aim for and improve on, that's tangible next year, and you can see how well you do next year as well. So yeah, that's kind of a bit about me and the comp line, and I'll pass you over to Andy Shaw.
Super. Thanks, Dan. So I met Dan, just to give you some real good inspiration. I met Dan about 4 years ago when he was come to the first nationals or the British Open. And Mike Chilvers had done the training with Dan, where he was. And he was where you guys all are, or that's those that you're in the Discovery group, that is. And 4 years later, Dan's British champion. So it just shows you the dedication. Dan was talking about mixing with this group of people. And probably about 8 years ago, I met Barney. And when I met Barney steering his way through with 12, 15 pilots, and we sat down and we spoke about various ways forward, I was really inspired with the energy that he's putting into the sport and you guys, and my connections in the business, in the industry with hang gliding, paragliding and paramotoring and parascending, parachuting. I've sort of used a lot of the knowledge to try and bring to the table to help raise sponsorship. So that brings you to my key point. I'm basically the sponsorship officer. I'm hounding everybody for money and funding. And then I'm at the event going to be your Discovery group coordinator. So I'll be working closely with Barney and Simon, the chief marshal. I mustn't call him launch marshal. He's chief marshal. He doesn't like being called chief launch marshal. So I'll be working closely with him to make sure you guys get great briefings, great debriefings, and we take off at the right time and place and just really have a great time together. Thanks, Barney.
Great. Thank you, Andy. I think that's all of us from the committee that are here need introductions, so we shall move on. I won't ask all 27 of you to go through and introduce yourselves. We'll be here forever. Right. What I will do then is I will start by sharing a screen and going through the task catalogue, which I didn't actually ask you all to print in advance, but I'm sure you have read. It's on the website. And I'll skim through the first part of it with a few kind of key general points, and then we'll go on to the tasks. And then as we work, the format will be, I will brief them one by one with a little bit of an example of kind of how they will relate to the map. We're going to use last year's 2022 map, which I'll introduce you to the oversight of the whole thing, so you get a sense of what it might look like translated to Kent. And then task by task, we'll go through, and Dan's got his overhead camera, and as our top pilot, he's going to talk you through to a set of numbers that I will pull out of the air. Hypothetical wind is this strong in this direction, and he will plan the maps with you on the ones that I've asked you to print out with that tool to show you how we would mark out minutes and plan some things, and you can follow along as necessary. This is very much not intended to be us talking at you. It's a conversation, so feel free to stick up hands, chip in, ask questions. First rule is that there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you're thinking it, someone else probably is too. So stick your hand up and say it, please. Right, I'll share my other screen. Can we all see that?
Yeah, looks good.
Yep.
Excellent. I'll skip over the first part. I hope you've all read this. This is the task catalogue is the kind of definitive ruling that we have to conform to the tasks. And if it ever comes to any ambiguity or challenging, if somebody didn't understand something, the task catalogue is what we will revert to as the definitive kind of article. We're going to give you a set of maps.
It's worth noting, if you're going for that top spot, knowing that catalogue inside out is really to your benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long catalogue, 17 pages. I wrote it, but I can't necessarily be relied upon to remember it absolutely verbatim, word for word. Some people in the room will know it better than I will at some point and pull me up in a briefing for something. But that's why we have the official paperwork, because there is some complexity here. Broadly speaking, we'll mark the airfield, we'll mark turn points, we'll mark a start line and a finish line. And in the case of this many pilots, they will be very clearly defined and very important to recognise that you cross the start line, which will be an out corridor from the airfield, and you cross the finish line, which will be an in corridor. And there should be, in that zone very close to the airfield, nobody going like that over one line to start and finish their tasks. The precise locations of those lines are what I will brief in the next briefing for this particular site. Probably we won't have any fuel depot points, which are like an outlanding airfield this year. We didn't get around to arranging them, but we have had them some years with an opportunity to land 50k away, restock your fuel and carry on the flight. And then you will have hidden gates, which we use on the track lines we mark out. These are, well, 2 key points figures. The turn points are a circle of 250 meters radius. So that's a much larger circle. The idea with turn points is it's not missing them because you got lost on the actual feature. You should be able to find them quite easily, but they are a wider, more strategic long distance flying to whether or not you do an extra 4 kilometer leg that way and then another 4 kilometers back, and you can make it back in your time rather than necessarily missing it because you were 10 feet out of the smaller radius circle. By contrast, the hidden gates that you have on track lines are 250 meters wide total rather than 500, which the turn points are. So when you're on a precision course, we are expecting a very tight degree of precision to the track line that we've marked. And I'll show you on the maps how that is marked and how clear that should be. Then, of course, we have no fly zones, which will be marked very clearly in red. Do not fly into them because there are penalties, and they're there for a reason. Some of them conform to the CAA map, which are airspace zones that we can't go into. Some of them are local to the area, specific sensitive sites, and so on, that we need to keep clear of. But they're all penalised just the same. No, I won't report you to the CAA if you fly into an airspace zone. If they miss it, that's their problem. But I will penalise you. Incursions then typically will incur 50% reduction on your points for that day's flying up to that point. So the idea that there's no advantage whatsoever in skipping a corner over a no-fly zone to get home a little bit quicker. But in the event that you have a small accident, you're blown sideways a little bit, you get lost, whatever, you don't lose everything for that day's flying. So 50% is the value we use. This bit here is about briefing. So the idea of today is that we're shortening that first briefing. So that Wednesday night briefing when we arrive on site will be basically, great, you're all here, any new updates on information that you need about safety, check you've all signed in, signed the registration forms, etc., give you the maps. We will then be around for any more questions you've got about the maps, but it won't be going through the next stages of briefing that we're going to do online in advance. We will then hold, typically, obviously the weather changes, so we need to have ongoing briefings throughout the competition. Every night after flying closes, so 9:30, depending on light, there will be an evening briefing, maybe even 10 o'clock, depending on how what else is going on. There'll be a shortish evening briefing giving you the outline of what's going on the next day, particularly with review of what we know about the weather. So if the weather's looking reliable, nice, high pressure, set to stay, we will tell you then that, say, the window will open at 0700 and be open till whenever. If it's a bit iffy, we might say that there's a short morning briefing at 0630 to confirm once we've checked the weather if there's likely to be mist or something like that. In which case, at that one, we might delay the opening of the window if necessary for safety reasons. But really, the briefings will not probably be about going through task by task what you're doing. That should be understood in advance from the task catalogue and from this briefing that you have reference, but also the chance for you to ask any more questions at those ones. Fueling, ignore the fuel depot zones point there, but on some of the tasks which are fuel limited, the economy tasks, then we will have a procedure for fueling and measuring the amount of fuel that pilots use in the task. For open championship classes, that is limited. So I will say you have 6 litres to go off and do this. Actually, I'll do it in kilograms because it's easier to measure. And pilots will go out, run through, and this I will brief again on the day with particular zones and so on, but they will go out, drain their fuel as far as they can, run their engine, fire it up on their back under marshal supervision, run it completely dry, and then they will weigh their tank or their spare fuel tank with X kilos of fuel, and under marshal supervision pour it back into the tank, and then put the machine in quarantine before that task until takeoff window opens. For discovery pilots who are not necessarily so comfortable either about gauging their fuel burn or about outlanding in an unknown place if you run out of fuel, you'll still be given the same fuel limit, but you can carry as much as you want, and we will weigh you out onto the airfield and then back in again. So you'll go out, you'll put your wing down on the field ready to go, but everything else you're going to fly with, your motor on your back, your helmet, your boots, your sunglasses, all the rest of it on you, and you will stand onto the weighing scales as you go onto the deck. Marshals will note your weight, and then when you land again, the first thing that you do is walk back off the deck and stand onto the weighing scales on the way off the deck, and so we can know quite accurately how much you've burned. The reason we don't use that method for the Open Championship and for FAI competition classes is because there is extensive discussion, shall we say, as to how much weight people lose by sweating during one flight, and a lot of argument to the effect that that disadvantages those who sweat more than those who sweat less. So that's why there's no substitute for a measured amount of fuel. But we like to keep things inclusive for the lower airtime pilots and those that are newer to competition. Outlandings. We expect you to come back to the airfield unless we've enabled any outlanding points specifically for fuel drop-offs, top-ups. If you have an engine problem, you land out elsewhere. Again, we don't want to penalise you 100% because that can knock you out of the competition, but we do have to recognise that we don't want people doing it for strategic reasons. And again, 50% penalty prevents you from going, oh, there's a nice strong wind, I'm just going to do a massive downwind dash, land out at the bottom, get picked up, driven home, and then lose 20% of my points, but do it all over again. So that 50% neatly disqualifies you from using that kind of strategy. The other important safety point about outlanding is that if you land out, you're a bit shaken up, you leave all your stuff down on the field and you wander off, take a breather, have a drink of water, sit in the bush for a bit, smoke a cigarette, whatever you want to do. Any pilot flying over you, seeing a wing flat out and a motor on the ground, can't necessarily see whether or not you're still attached to it. And they have to assume, if they see that you might have had a serious accident and be unconscious or worse. So they are obligated to land if they see that and to help you. And we will do our best to make sure that doesn't adversely affect any point scoring if they're on competition. But it's not really fair of you to do that and leave it there and tempt them to do that if they can't see it. So the rule is you wrap up your ball up your wing immediately on landing, fold their canopy up within 3 minutes of landing is the rule. Yeah. So if you're flying over somebody and it's on the ground, circle for 3 minutes. If they still haven't moved it, you are obligated to land and provide assistance. Only so long as you can do so safely, of course. First rule is do no harm to yourself, first and foremost. Likewise, if you've balled it, sat out for 15 minutes, had a break, and then if you can take off and fly home yourself, you're welcome to do so. But don't lay your stuff out ready to go, ready to take off, and then go back and have another 15-minute break. If you're setting up to take off, set up to take off. Steve, you got a question?
I was just going to ask, is there any sort of comms? Because I imagine most of us will have two-way radios that we use for when we're flying around the clubs and stuff. But is there going to be a frequency we can be on to call in when we see stuff like that? Or
we will make sure we have a frequency you can call in on. For discovery pilots, you're allowed to use mobile phones. So our first and foremost rule is mobile phones, because we know a lot of people don't have radios. And for Open Championship, pilots are not allowed to carry either radios or mobile phones. If they carry them, they can take mobile phone with them, but it must be sealed. And that's another. Next paragraph here: electronic equipment. Pilots must carry a GPS unit that we give them, which is a tracker only. They can't use it for navigation. If they're taking a mobile phone, it must be in front of a marshal, switched off in front of the marshal's face, then put into a bag which is sealed and signed by the marshal. And then the first thing you do when you get off the field is you take that phone bag back to the marshals and they witness you unsealing it. If you have to land out, you have to unseal your phone to call us anyway. And the rule is that you do call us as soon as possible. You lose your 50% of points, but then you can reseal it once you picked up or whatever's happened. If you want to carry on flying, so you land out and you actually, for whatever reason, you landed, but your engine's fine and you can take off again. This is Open Championship class only. You need to not unseal your phone, so that if you want to carry on collecting points on your way back to the airfield. So so long as you're fine, you don't have to call us. If you're fine and you've balled your wing and you're just sitting out, you don't have to call us straight away. But if you need a pickup, obviously you have to unseal the phone and call us, and you're not going to be getting points on the way back anyway because you're being picked up. So we'll give you all a phone number. You've all got my mobile number anyway on Teams, on WhatsApp. So that's your first port of call. And we'll give you Chief Marshals and my Deputy Director, Andy Phillips, as well. So you'll have plenty of opportunities. Does that answer your question? That's a good point then. If we talk about electronic equipment, we're going to give you all one of these. I will put that link in the chat so you can download the instruction manuals. You can't navigate from it. There is some very simple procedures of pushing buttons to make sure it works, and the red line across the top is the battery bar. Off the top of my head now, I can't even remember exactly what order it is, but I think you get a triple flash across these 3 icons, which tell you that it's logging. Or is it just a single flash of the green satellite icon? Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
Flashes in sequence.
Three flashes in sequence.
Yeah.
So you'll each be issued with one of them. We will then publish at Comp's website on the live tracking page exactly where everybody is. So you can direct all of your hordes of adoring fans to this page here. and they can watch you zooming around Kent live, or I say live, with about, I think it's about a 2 or 3 minute delay, so that if teams have people on the ground watching and are cheating and putting in comms with each other, then they can't get too much information of exactly where someone is absolutely live. But it's really important for us to know where people are. And again, we can see if somebody's static on the ground, it flashes a warning at us. If you've landed and we haven't heard from you a few minutes later, we'll be expecting you either to have taken off or and we'll see you moving again, or to be phoning in quite soon. The question arose last year, and it's just reminded me, in fact, that we haven't written that into the rule book, but it arose in a briefing. And I'll make a note here, land out, figure of 8. So if you are in open championship class, you don't want to break the seal on your mobile phone and you land out, so that we can see from the trace that you're okay, we ask you to take your logger and walk in a large figure of 8 around the field a few times. So like a 100-meter wide figure of 8, just so we can very clearly see that you're okay, you're moving around, you're probably planning on taking off again. I think most people in this room are Discovery Championship anyway, but for Open Championship pilots, that's a way of telling us, without breaking your mobile phone seal, that you're fine and you're planning on taking off again. We will allow Open Championship pilots, if they want to carry a what we call basic non-GPS or internet enabled mobile phone. So if we are cancelling a task, or you want to use that to call us back and tell us that you're okay, you can do so, because we know that you can't navigate from it, but you will need to declare that to us before you take off, or at the beginning of the competition, and give us the number of it and so on. Aircraft, fairly obvious, needs to be airworthy, needs to be sensible. We reserve the right to stop anybody taking off if our marshals and our chief safety officer observe something they consider to be too unsafe on a paramotor airframe. Just make sure you take the time well in advance, go through everything, triple check every buckle, every toggle, every line, every strap, nothing dangling, nothing frayed, nothing looking too dodgy, all your frame, all the welds, all the fuel lines on the back, replace them if necessary, clean out your fuel filters, put new ones in, all that sort of good maintenance, because you will be getting a lot of flying in 3 days. You'll be getting a lot more than you do if you got your field every week or two for a 40-minute bimble. It puts machines through their paces. What was he did last year, Dan? 13 hours in 3 days, something like that.
Yeah, if not a bit more. Yeah. Good going. It's good going.
Must all have emergency parachutes. You must all have helmets. Every time you're strapped into the harness of your machine, you're wearing your helmet. So even if you're just going out on the deck to warm it up a bit, or to check some new carb setting or whatever else, helmet on if the machine is on your back. It's an insurance thing, it's a safety thing, it's a good rule to have. There's no reason not to. The other issue on aircraft is that we expect you to fly the same aircraft throughout the competition substantially, except propellers or carburettor jets may be changed. So you can, without asking us, tune your jets if it's a different day, different task, whatever, that's allowable, because that's within the operational parameters of choosing a carb that you can change jets in. Likewise, propellers, and propellers occasionally do get bust, although we don't see that nearly as much as we used to nowadays, which is a good thing. If such damage occurs in a fall that you do actually need to change your airframe or your wing or something, we will normally allow it, but if we consider that the new equipment you're changing to might give you some kind of advantage in a task, so your spare machine is a mini plane when previously you were flying a Moster, and you change it because you break the Moster just before the economy task, we will make a decision as to an appropriate penalty to apply to you for that task, so that you can't be perceived to be getting an advantage by changing that equipment. But we won't stop you flying the rest of the competition. The other thing is comp bottles. Again, probably not relevant for all of you. Has anybody in this room got what was known as a comp bottle or a header tank? Good. You may see one or two, and they're for FAI style competition and the way they do it at international comp. They are something you still need really to be at the highest end of competitiveness in fuel economy tasks. We've designed them out of this competition, largely because I have seen some incredibly dangerous setups over the years of people fettling around with fuel systems and dodgy Coke bottles with a fuel pipe kind of hot glue gunned into the side of it, and just a disaster waiting to happen.
Thailand still do that. In Brazil, they were still using Coke bottles.
Yeah, I mean, crazy stuff.
Absolutely crazy.
I've also seen the effects firsthand of the injuries caused by, there was a French pilot about 15 years ago who flew into a comp bottle as a header tank. So it's a 1 litre bottle held by your head that the fuel pumps up into, and then it drains by gravity into the carburetor. And the idea is that you can see it draining at eye level down to, you can judge it down to a few millilitres quite accurately. This French pilot had one rigged to his machine, and he flew into a power line and it caught fire and blew burning fuel all over his face. He survived, but barely. Not pretty. So we banned them, except for if a pilot has their machine rigged up for international competition and the system is approved by the manufacturer of the machine and installed by them, we will allow it on the basis that it would then be more dangerous for them to start de-rigging it and rerunning different fuel systems that they're not normally flying with. So that's the only, so if anybody is intending to carry a competition bottle, I need to see evidence in advance that their manufacturer of their frame and machine has approved it in some way. Case in point being Benny, who flies with one. Right, assistance pilots. If you're airside, we do encourage help. This format of competition is not about everybody on their own. If you're on the deck and you're all BHP insured because you're on the competition, the guy next to you's fluffs to launch, gets his lines all tangled, you're welcome to help him. Or if he's about to launch and he just needs a bit of help resetting up the wing, fine. Non-competition pilots, spectators, not airside, not helping. If you're bringing friends with you, family, whatever, we will give them a specific wristband that enables them access to the campsite, but not onto the deck. Only BHPA pilots or marshals on the deck. We may cancel tasks. I'm still working on exact details of this, so I'll brief that on the safety briefing, but there will be, given that many of you are flying without comms, a system by which we will send out, if we cancel a task because there's some weather coming in or something altogether, we'll send out a text to those that have mobile phones, so all of the Discovery pilots can see a mobile phone, and any in Open Championship that have a non-GPS enabled one. But we'll also have a system of tarpaulins on the ground, so if you're approaching the airfield, you're a kilometre away, if you can see, it will be a large blue tarpaulin with a yellow marker on it of some sort, like 4 meters wide. The reason we would do that is that if there is a helicopter coming in for a medical evacuation, for example, because someone's had a crash on landing, you need to know about it and just be aware that the signal there is come in, land safely at the edge of the airfield, out the way, and be very aware there might be a helicopter coming in for safety reasons. So just, it's an awareness raiser. But again, I will brief specific details on that 2 weeks from now as to the exact system that we're going to use. Right, valid championship is if we get 5 hours task flying window open for open championship, or 3 hours for discovery in 3 days, will make it valid. Any questions so far on general safety format before we move on to the tasks? Right. Before we look at the tasks, then I'm going to go to a representative map. So this is an example of the kind of map that was given last year. This is spread over 6 A2 pages. So if I look at my artboards, you can just about see the outlines there. If I put a new layer in.
I've got it in physical form, if that's any help, Barney.
Roughly, that one is an A2. There we go. You can see that a bit better. Now my illustrator seems to have frozen, hopefully. Give it a minute. Have you got yours up there, Dan, that you can share?
Not illustrated, but I've got the actual physical map here with me.
Yeah. So that's an A2, the bold black line. They then overlap by about that much. And again, 4 more of them like that. Can you hold yours up, Dan? Yeah. We'll print on A2. We'll give you 6. It'll probably be 5, actually, the way it arranges itself around Kent. A2 sheets. And the first task is the origami. So on the A2 sheets that you've been given, snipping them both across somewhere on this overlap zone, aligning them up, sellotaping along the back, join them all together to be one nice big complete selection of maps. And then fabloning over the top side of it. So you can probably see the shininess on Dan's. You know what I mean by fablon, the sort of lamination plastic roll that you get from W.H. Smith that you can lay out. So you can turn it into a plastic laminated map, which enables you to scribble all over it with even permanent marker pens, mark up all your tasks individually, and then that's the stuff next time. So that's an important one to get hold of and bring with you. Because, of course, any of the individual navigation tasks, you will mark up one day for one set of wind conditions, and then you might not fly it that day, but you'll go back to it the next day with a completely different set of wind conditions.
I think Mike Fleck has got his hand up, Barney.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Barney. You spoke about giving us 5 A2s. You not mean A4? You gave me a fright there for a moment.
Sorry, I mean A3s.
A3s. Okay.
So, yeah, what you're looking at here is A3 size.
Okay, I just figured out my board size is not going to be big enough when you said A2. Okay, thanks.
Well, you say that, but realistically, you're actually not going to be using the whole of that deck at any time. So, Dan, what's the diameter of your board there?
Good question. I actually made this a little bit bigger for flying, but roughly I think it's about 40 It's 45 centimeters, but I used to fly one at 41, I think.
Yeah.
So it fits like a A3 sheet on it quite comfortably. I just wanted a little bit extra for doing much longer flying, really. So if I was doing 5 hours, I might have 2 tasks set up where I could fold it like this, get to this point on the map, and then just flip it over in flight and then carry on going. So yeah, it's a little bit of like Barney said, origami, but yeah, it's usually works out that you can get most of your flight path on one sitting of a map stuck down.
So to illustrate that on this one, I'll zoom in a moment on the airfield, but these dots here are the airfield. On any one flight, you might go off and do, I've now turned on, you can see these bold lines in blue are the example precision routes. So you could fit in these 2 roughly within one A3 sheet and get back to the airfield. And that would be, well, that's 46 kilometers. That one's 35 kilometers plus some turn points. That would be a 100-kilometer flight out and back within an A3. So not even having to fold the map if that's the route you decide you're doing on that day.
I think that was exactly the route I did last year on my first flight. So there you go. So it does actually work in true practice as well.
So you're thinking about where you're going. You might, depending on what you're doing, need to set up a system where there's sort of one turn in flight at the midpoint to go back the other way. And that's where you can learn a lot from the comp pilots at the event, because all of them have developed their own systems of origami.
Benny's got it cracked. I'm pretty sure he's pretty good at getting those maps together. He's very swift.
So the red zones on this are the no-fly zones. They are traced, if I turn off the Ordnance Survey, that's the air map underneath. That one seems to have shifted a little bit. That's probably just me dragging things around by mistake. In fact, several of them. Ignore the fact that some of these red dots are out of place. I've been playing with this map and moving these around a bit. But basically, I trace the exact positions of the CAA no-fly zones. This was the wash with the bombing training area. There's various glider airfields, things like that. But I then overlay that very exactly with the Ordnance Survey map that we're going to be actually flying with. We fly with the Ordnance Survey 1 to 50,000, but we blow it up to be 1 to 66,000, which means that we have each of these blue squares that marks 1 kilometer on our map as printed measures exactly 15 millimeters. The reason we do that, so on the 1 to 50,000, it would be 2 20 millimeters. That's a bit too much, that we cover it too quickly. We can't get enough on a page. If we halve that and went 1 centimeter to 1 kilometer, which is 1 to 100, it loses a little bit too much detail. We've tried flying with it. So we've found for 15 years now that 1 to 66K, 15 millimeters per kilometer works very well for the kind of distances that we can cover in one flight and the space we can fit on a map board, whilst leaving us this beautifully detailed Ordnance Survey map that is quite literally the best in the world, the world standard.
Yeah.
In this case, our airfield was there. This one. I can't remember now.
By the river.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Which I deliberately didn't mark. This red line, in this case, was both start and finish line in terms of timing in and out of tasks. The reason I do that is because I don't want people thinking that they're running out of time on a task window and they've got to get down and land and they've got 1 minute to get on the ground and they're cutting in front of people to try and get on the ground unsafely. So as far as any kind of task timing is concerned, once you've crossed this line back in, you've got a couple of kilometers either way around the airfield to line yourself up, keep well clear. If there's a big gaggle going in, wait your turn until there's time that you can come in safely, but there's no pressure on it. Likewise, going out on a task, you can take off here, come up here, circle, climb up to 500 feet, 1,000 feet, whatever your cruising altitude is, and then be ready to go when you cross the start line. You're all pre-orientated. You can navigate, pre-navigate to the first turn point you're heading for, or whatever. So I will at Manston designate actually not a complete ring. In this case, the whole line was both start and finish. People come in and out either direction. Given how crowded it is at Manston and how many of us there are, I will probably designate 1 2-kilometre stretch that is the out corridor, and a separate one in a different place that is the in corridor. We'll have an anti-clockwise flow around the airfield coming in and out. Typically, we would put no-fly zones around local villages for the sake of the neighbours. We then zoom out and we have this choice of different types of tasks, which is what we can go through in a moment in the navigation task. On this map, I've got them all highlighted in extra bold, so you can see them. Likewise, the turn points, you can see these are the green rings. And each of them is all going to be on a very clearly defined feature, a very obvious one. We do it as a circle around the feature so that you don't, if I put a big cross over it, then the actual cross would be obscuring the symbol of whatever the feature is that you're looking for. And the map that you're actually given, the printed one, will look like that. So the turn points will just be a single ring around whatever is an obvious feature. So it's the crossroad, it's the turn point, it's the intersection there. It could also be a church on that one. You probably can't see my mouse very easily. But, and then you have the precision routes, which again, on the one I give you printed will be very, very fine line. But I will have one up in the main tent that has all of these highlighted green and blue bold like this, so that when you're marking up your maps, you can find them, but you can choose whatever system you prefer to use in terms of different color highlighters, whatever you like works for you. Everyone's got their own system, so that's why I do it that way. I don't want to presuppose it. The only other really important point to note here is that each of these precision routes has a very specific start and finish point. For obvious reasons, we do not want people going opposite directions, particularly when they're on a very tightly defined corridor that they're working within. So you go into any of the precision route through the in arrow, and you finish it where I have this sort of turn point with a red marker on it. So the red line is there that if you've got it wrong and you're deciding to approach from the south, in this case, onto that end of it, you should see a red bold line, think, hang on, red normally means stop. Maybe I'm going into this the wrong way. Other things on the map, these dotted circles represent 20 kilometers out from the airfield and 40 kilometers out from the airfield. They're there partly as a navigation guidance for you, and I think this one was 10 kilometers, or maybe that was a different nautical miles that we agreed with the local aviation, but I might put that at 10k. That's partly for your own navigation, returning to base purposes. If you know you've got 10 kilometers left in your tank and you're roughly halfway between there and there's no wind, you're more likely to get home. But it's also the turn point values. You can see the ones on the inside of this line have a single ring, which means they're worth 1 point. The one on the outside of it has a double ring, which means it's worth 2 points. So either side of the 20 kilometer mark, either side of the 40 kilometer mark, they're worth 3 points. So there is an advantage on the turn point hunt element of the competition for the ones that you can bag a whole load of points. Those that did a run out here and then did a nice line down this western end collecting 3 point turn points, bagged a good hoard that day. I will haven't quite finalised the exact distribution of turn points on the maps, but I will also say that for discovery, I will limit the area and the distance away from base relative to the Open Championship. So there will be probably, might be within the 20k mark, or I might adjust that one way or the other, depending on what I can work. But there will be some tasks, the navigation tasks that specifically discovery can only do them, but not the outer ones. And then there'll be some in the outer zones, which are for the main Open Championship. Because we're bearing in mind that we have on the discovery a lot of brand new pilots, and particularly we've included the club pilot level into that as well. The club pilots, again, we have to have another conversation with before you go out on each task to make sure that actually you're keeping yourselves and your plans within what you are insured to do by the BHPA. You're building your airtime, you're building your navigation experience within limits so that you can then sign that off on the logbook with Mark Shaw when you do the exam. But you're not going to be you're not going to be in the competitive sort of end of the scoring system on the discovery class. But it's a slightly different thing. But that will be with conversation. We'll ask the club pilots to have a conversation. I don't think there's 3 of you, maybe. We'll pick up that with you individually as a short briefing before you take off on any particular task with Andy and either me or Andy Phillips whenever we can as well. There may also, just the last thing to say, is be some other annotations on the map. So this jet fighter symbol here was, in that case, because it's quite heavily military used, and they have a transit that goes across in that direction. So we mark that as just a reminder to you to be looking in one direction or another for military jets if they happen to be coming across. I don't think that applies at the moment to Kent, but it may be something I have to put on there, and I'll brief you on it. Other information on the map. Any map questions so far? Right.
Yeah, I've got one, Barney. Do we have different maps then to the competition pilots?
No, it'll be the same map, all the same map, but there may be some tasks. So the specific, like numbered tasks, task 6, this one, some of the further away ones, I will say are only for Open Championship, so that I keep the discovery pilots in a tighter zone around the airfield, and the main Open Championship go a bit further afield. So you'll know when I give you the maps which ones you can and can't do if you're discovery class.
Okay, thank you.
I will make it very clear visually as well, so you can't get confused on the day that by using a different color line or something too. Okay, let's pop back to task catalog then. So we've got 3 different types of precision navigation task, and really that's what this competition is about. The turn points are a bonus, and we'll come to them. The first one is described as precision navigation over a known circuit, but basically that means snake navigation. So we'll give you a course between either just a start and a finish, or it may have some specific turn points within it. And your objective is to fly that as accurately as possible within a corridor of 250 meters wide. So either side of that is 125. Good example of that is this one here. So it will be windy. There will be some tighter corners and some smoother ones. It will go around a good range of different wind directions relative to the wind, keep you on your toes. And if I turn off the bold track on that, so you're moving to a line corridor, if that's 250.
I just worked out while you were talking, Barney, that the corridor corresponds to 3.75 millimeters. They're quite small.
Thank
actually.
you. You preempted.
Yeah. I was then working out actually how wide a highlighter is. Turns out they're 5 mil. But if you put like a biro line on either side, that roughly works out to to what it is. So it's quite small, actually.
Maybe you can zoom in on your map, Dan. I lost my stroke on that.
Yeah. 1 second.
What on earth is going on there? Got a dash line on it. There we go.
Yeah, we've got this line here.
Got another question, Barney.
Yeah.
If you go outside the snake and then you return in, do you lose the points for that, or how do you work that out?
Yeah, so good point. I'm marking these on as representative gates, and in fact that's probably too big. So 250 meters wide would be a quarter of one of these squares, about like that. And the way I will score this is I will have a number of these, which you won't know where they are, but I will have them marked perpendicular to the track. So, along this point here. So let's say there. I might have 8 or 10 of them on this track. If your flight track, let's change the color on this and do it something you can track. So you'll cross this. You'll be coming along here. You'll go over this feature here, which starts your timer, and electronically our time goes from the nearest point your track goes to that point. So let's say you cross it sort of there. We will time you from the nearest point of your track to the center of the feature. You'll then be flying along, sort of following this as best you can. And then you'll get that turn point there because you'll go through that gate. And then you come up here. And let's say you go wide out here. But then you think, oh, I've gone too far downwind, I'm coming up here. And then you come back and you're back on track down here. And you carry on. So you would score that gate. You would not score that gate because you're outside of it. And then you would score that one and so on as you go through it.
I've got PES to open if you want me to screen share quickly.
Oh yeah, if you've got an example of the track.
So in theory, you could get lucky. You could go off course in between gates and correct yourself, and it won't matter if you manage to hit the next gate.
You could, and people do. I'm a sneaky bugger, and I've flown these many times before, and I will probably tend to put the gates in places that I know people are quite likely to get lost or be going off course. Particularly where you might have sudden changes in direction, or you might have features on the ground which are fewer and further between, like this probably 2 kilometer spot between this road here and that building and then that crossroad. You've got quite a long straight with a bit of curvature on it. You're navigating by dead reckoning, really, in terms of your distance up here. You've got a slight kink in that dike there, and you're slightly north of it. So you might well find that there's a turn point sitting itself around, or a gate rather, somewhere like that.
I'm going to have to read.
Of course, you won't find out exactly where those are until I publish all the tracks at the end. But you will get a score if you do it on the first day. That task, I will be giving the scores out day by day as best we can. And all right, that says task 8. In this case, I've given you the points value for that task. I've actually changed the scoring system this year, but NBP is the number of hidden gates. So this is scored. If I have, in this case, last year they were worth 5 points each. So that was 8 hidden gates I would have had on a 40 kilometer track. So you're talking one gate every 5 kilometers or so. This year we're scoring it slightly differently. We've actually decided to bring the scoring closer to standard FAI classic comps and normalize it. So the number of gates on the track, that's the number of gates you hit. And then NB max, is the number of gates the top pilot in the competition hit. So if there's 10 gates there and Daniel goes and flies through and gets all 10, you get a percentage of that 10 points. And if you score 5 gates, you get 5 out of 10 times 1,000, so 500 points to the 1,000 that he gets. If it's a really hard course and the best pilot only gets 8 of the 10 gates, and you get 5, you get 5 out of 8 multiplied by 1,000. So it's normalized in that way. And I will state in this little information pack how many gates there are on the track before you do it. Although actually it doesn't necessarily. I gave it there last year because we weren't normalizing, so it was a strategic value to know how many points it was worth. This time you know how many points it's worth. It's worth 1,000, so I don't actually need to tell you how many gates are on it. I just need to think about it myself. So you won't know that this year. That's the easiest of the precision navigation tasks because there's no pre-planning and pre-declaration. You go up, you fly it. Other than, well, there is pre-planning and strategy on this. Maybe Dan could talk you through how you'd approach thinking about flying a task like this. Do you want to take over on this, Dan?
For the snake?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think realistically, for this comp, it's about precision and not about speed. So if it's sort of your first time flying snakes and navigation like this, it pays you dividends to be a bit slower, so you can pay a bit more attention to being a bit more accurate. And the way I'd approach flying a snake in particular is I would look for like the larger features to start with. So as I'm approaching the course, obviously identify your start gate. It's usually something that's quite clear. In this instance, we've got a train track by the looks of it crossing a road. And then because our maps are really good, you can see the individual houses as well. So always, whenever you're flying, make sure you've got at least 3 things that definitely let you know that you're in that position. So it might be a house, the train tracks crossing, and then an adjacent road or something like that. And then that way,
what I've done on this track here, just to fill you in on that, I've moved around. So you would come around here, line up a couple of kilometers in advance of the track you're going to take. And then as you're lining up to it, you can be doing what Dan just said, pre-navigating. You can be spotting, or I can see this first crossroad. I'm going to go over there. I can see the buildings another kilometer further on. So you've pre-navigated the next 2 or 3 kilometers ahead of you before you're even in the course.
Yeah, and it's just a case of finding the big things that you can see in real life, then finding that on your map, and then you can fill in the smaller details in between those larger things that you're looking at. And then it's just a process of rinse and repeat, really. So you're looking for the next thing. So as Barney said, we've got the T junction there with the houses on is the first one, and then we've got another T junction up above that, and you can probably see those from quite a distance away as well. I tend to fly anywhere sort of between 700 and 1,000 feet when I'm navigating, sometimes a bit higher as well. Any higher than that and you like much more than 1,500 and you start being a little bit too high to sort of get yourself precise, but too low, once again, you put yourself in the issue that you can't see far ahead. So sort of around 1,000 feet is probably a good height to fly at. And then literally it's just making sure that you can find the bigger objects. That might be like a woods are fairly accurate to our maps, but hard features like roads and stuff like that are also really good. And then just filling in the micro details in between, and then just keep going over that, and then just make sure you've got a good lookout on airspace as well as the other important one. Don't forget to look up from your map every so often, and we should be all looking out, giving a good lookout anyway. But it's quite easy to get lost in these maps and concentrate more on that than it is to be flying safe. So Mick, you've got a question?
Yeah, it's only a quick one. On the navigation task, say you've done task 8, for example, and you didn't think you'd done any good.
Yeah.
If there's time available, can you land and redo the task to better it?
No.
No.
Once you've started a task and clearly made an effort to score in it,
Yeah.
That's considered to have then had your first go. You're pre-flying it, so there's no going back round and starting again if you get it wrong. If you inadvertently go over, let's say you're transiting between this turn point and this one, and you happen to cross this start point inadvertently, it's very obvious from the track that you didn't actually try to follow that task. But if you got as far down this line as scoring that first gate, then we would say that's your attempt done on that task. Michael, question.
2 questions. You mentioned about missing a gate that you'd lose the points. What happens if you miss the starting gate, for one? And then if you do miss a gate and you realize, can you do a UE and go around and pick it up, or do you have to just sort of carry on and write it off?
Okay, there were 2 questions in there then. If you miss the start gate, but you then go on and score the rest of the gates, depending on the task, I can still give you points. So on a snake, I can score you the rest of the points because there's no timed element. So I would give you the scores you get. On either of the other 2 tasks, they're based on a time from crossing the start point. So if you miss the start point, but I do, for that very reason, use a point rather than a hidden gate for the start, so that it's 500 meters wide rather than 250, because I don't want people wasting 40 kilometers worth of flight to lose all their points for that reason. That's why they're defined explicitly as a 500 meter circle. What was the other question? Can you do a loop around? Yes, but there is a very specific rule against backtracking, what we call backtracking. So have I got that defined in the task catalogue? Pretty sure I do. No, I don't. It's in the FAI catalogue, and I haven't actually put the diagram into here, I don't think. Okay, I will amend that. I'll find it again in a moment. But essentially, backtracking is within this corridor of 250 meters width, is traveling anywhere in the opposite direction to the direction of travel, more than 90 degrees in relation to the direction of the track line within the corridor. So if you need to come out, you get lost, turn right and go well out over here somewhere. Let me draw it so that we've got. So I'm going to come out here. Okay, I'm lost. I'm going to go out this way, be well outside. Okay, I found where I'm going. Now I'm going to come in and rejoin the corridor and carry back on. Yeah. So you're well, any circuiting you're doing is well out of the corridor, so you're not going to be turning head on into somebody potentially coming in behind you. The objective then is to come back in at exactly the point that you left it, so that you don't risk, if I had a hidden gate there and you crossed it twice, as shown there, you would invalidate that gate. So there is a small risk in getting lost that you lose a gate. But it's very unlikely, so long as you're, I mean, if I move that even closer in, if you're coming right in on the edge there, so you're very unlikely. But if you're even further out and you go like that, I happen to have this gate there, you could just miss it, if you see what I mean. So that's the risk you take if you get lost. But if you're getting lost, then you deserve to lose a point or 2. That's the point of the game.
Don't get lost.
Don't get lost and don't backtrack.
Another question from Mike.
Yeah, hi. This is a real noddy general question, but these OS maps, what flavour are they? I'm more of a digital person. We've got Explorer, Land Ranger.
It's the Land Ranger 1 to 50,000.
Thank you.
So you can buy that from Memory Map. These are all come from memory back. I'm using the high def version because it lets me print to A3 directly to PDF. But if you get the slightly cheaper one, you don't need the high def. Yeah.
Where's it from again? Which site?
Let me pull it up. Find it.
I think you can get it from multiple places, but I use memory map personally. Yeah, same as you buy.
OS Land Ranger 1 to 50,000, England and Wales. Well, that's trying to download it straight away.
Right, cheers.
That's year's subscription to the HD version is now 13 quid. So it's got cheaper recently. I'll put that in the chat as well. And Discovery pilots are welcome to carry any devices they want, phones, tablets, whatever you want. If you want to have this map up digitally in front of you, you're welcome to do that too. Another point Dan was making about the safety, keeping awareness. Yeah, your cycle of where your vision is going is sort of a 3-point cycle. I would go map, ground, airspace, map, ground, airspace. Check the map, check where I am on the ground that follows it, look up around me 360 degree or 180 degree at least, back to my map, back to the ground. And it's very easy to get competition fever, suddenly realize you're lost, or you're really focusing on that task line, and you completely forget to be looking around you and doing your normal pilot awareness checks, airspace checks. So just keep that in the forefront of your head at all times, that it's a 3-part cycle of vision and checking. I would also, as I'm flying this, so marking my map, I would, as Dan just said, the width of a highlighter. It's basically the width of the corridor on these maps, near enough. So I would, when I get it, actually before I've put the Fablon onto the map, go over this fine line with a highlighter. I prefer yellow, but everyone's got their own preference. Just trying as accurately as I can to keep the center of the highlighter blade in the middle of the line, and that's a good enough one. That means your eye comes straight back to it. If you're glancing up, you can find it again on the page. But I would also be flying that with my finger permanently following the track on the map. So depending if you're left or right hand throttle. That's another point on.
I was going to say
another point on setup. Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say another tip for that is I quite like to strike a line through where I've definitely been, but a little bit behind me, just in case like there's a bit of pertinent information of like a house or something I need to actually see. But it's a nice visual. I was definitely there. If you like, sometimes you need to get onto both brakes and then you have to let go of your map. But yeah, that's another thing I do.
Well, in terms of throttle, you don't need it so much for this one, but Dan just said strike it out, use a pen. So I'm right-handed. I've got my machine set up with my throttle in my left hand, specifically so that I can have my right hand that's more dexterous to use a pen on my maps. Different people have different setups. I wouldn't advise you change at the last minute, but if you are currently running your throttle in your writing hand and you have time to adjust it to the other side and do a bit of practice flying with it before the comp, I'd suggest you do that because it's very useful to be able to write on your map in flight. Okay, so you're flying this, you go around, you don't know how you do, but you do the best you can, and then you come out at the other end and you'll cross again a much wider 500-meter wide exit gate, so that you for timed runs you can't risk losing all the points by missing it. And they will always be over clearly defined features. Any questions on snakes? Okay. Move on to precision navigation with estimated speed. So this is what we call declared speed, and we expect in advance of taking off that morning that if you're intending to go up and do, in fact, this is, let's use the task I gave you in the pack, this one, declared speed. So Danny Jones is taking off from here. He's planning on flying down this way, maybe doing another task on the way, but at some point in his flight, he wants to do this declared speed task. That one. He's looking at that firstly and saying, right, I'm going in that way, out that way. It's 40 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 turn points on there. And these are actually the turn points for where the track changes because they're wider. I don't want you losing them. But you are looking to make a judgment for that day's wind conditions on how long it will take you in seconds to get from the nearest point to this start point to this point here. And then again to that point there, then again to that point there, and so on. And I expect you to give to me on that a declaration before you take off. And I'm going to do that digitally this year. I will find an example of the form in a moment. We have had bits of paper, but with this many pilots, the risk of a bit of paper getting lost, if you give it to a marshal and it gets blown out the box and nobody notices, and then you do the whole task and so on. So we're going to do it digitally. Let me just find the form example. It's not quite finished yet, but
I'll do what I did one year, Barney, was plan all my declared tasks, go up to get to the flight, and then realise as you get there you haven't handed in your declaration sheet. That was a good one.
Well, yeah, still sitting in your pocket.
Yeah, and that's where being able to write on your map is very handy, because I was able to pick up the same amount of points in turn points actually as doing the declared time. So it was more guaranteed points in the end, but it's good to challenge yourself.
There we go. So I will share you all a link to a Google form, and before you take off, you can load it on your phones or whatever. You put your name, number, choose which task it is that you're doing, tell me what day it is, and then you're giving me for each timing gate your time of arrival in seconds from your start point. So you might be saying, I will arrive, split the screen on this. This is the start point. This is timing gate 1, timing gate 2, timing gate 3. And depending on what's that, about 4 kilometers, let's say you're going at 60 kilometers an hour, which is 4 minutes. So you would then go and put in 240 seconds for that first one. If that's going to take you another 2 minutes for that leg, we'll add on another 120. So that would be 360 seconds in times of arrival from the start point, and so on and so forth. That's the mechanics of it. We'll come to how you work those out in a moment. The other thing to say there is that, let's say I declare 240 seconds on that first one, but the wind is actually much more behind me and much stronger, so I'm blasting down here much faster than I thought, and I can see myself arriving here at only 150 seconds have gone by, and I'm coming up there. Oh, I need to get out of the way so I don't go over it too soon. What I don't want is people wiggling around, slowing themselves down here with lots of loops. That would be backtracking. So there are also hidden gates. So much like well, the same as the hidden gate I gave you before on the snake task, probably somewhere around there is quite likely to be a hidden gate. So that if you're coming up here and doing your oh no, I need to slow down, I'm going to have to go out here and do some loops off corridor. If I miss that and I come back in, then you also fail to score that point. So really, you shouldn't be needing to do that if you've made your correct judgment on the wind, which is what we're going to talk about how to do next. Right, planning task then. Do you want to lead on this one, Dan? Is Dan still with that?
Yep, sorry, I was on mute. That's a good start. Yeah, happy to. I was actually just trying to mirror my camera so it's the right way around, but I can't seem to actually do it on here, which is really helpful. So sorry about this. I have to read my notes mirrored. So essentially, what I'll start doing is I'll take my task, as you can see here, and I've highlighted it as we normally do with our highlighters. I've gone for a nice pink color. I quite like pink on my maps. It tends to show up quite well. And then essentially I'll just work out how many legs there are in this task. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 legs. I'll then write down on a sheet of paper for my calculations, leg 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I've basically worked that from obviously counting the amount of turn points. And then I'll go through the next stages of working out which heading you'll be flying on for those legs. So I've started doing that here. So for the first leg, I've worked out that it'll be a bearing of 229. So how I've done that is I've taken a compass here, just any compass that will do 360 degrees, placed it on the start of this map here. Hopefully you can see that, maybe not so well as detailed as I can, but making sure it's square because my compass is a little bit too big for this route. I will just lay a ruler on there, and that gives me 229 on the on that bearing. Okay, so essentially all you do is you go through and you work that out for each one. I'm not going to do all of them straight away because it'll take a bit of time to do that. So let's move on to kind of the next step really, is, and a good piece of advice is to extend your first leg out. So hopefully you can see that. Let's move it around. This is really hard when it's mirrored. I'll extend my first leg further beyond. So I'll just lay a ruler on and just extend that, because then once you've got your calculated speed, you can mark up this extra piece of line before you get to your first start gate, and it gives you a good indication of how fast you are actually traveling. So if you're traveling faster than your calculated speed, you'll know to slow up before you even get to the start gate, and it puts you in a good position then to be at the right speed, and it sort of works out the rest of for the track as well. Cool. So drawn that extra bit of line on. We've worked out all of our bearings. Let's just take that with a pinch of salt. I've done the first two. So then what I'll need to know is my wind speed and direction. So what wind speed and direction have we got, Barney, today?
Let's keep things simple. Let's say we're going 10 kilometers an hour, dead northerly. So coming directly from the north to the south. Okay, so that'll be a heading of 0 from the wind. So then I was thinking, okay, let's do it that way. Yeah, heading of 0 if it's going from south to north into wind, but if it's coming from north to south, it would be 180. Yeah, so the wind's coming from the north, yeah? Yeah. Yeah, so 0. Yes, from 0. Yes. Yeah. Yes, from 0, yeah. Right, so from there, hopefully some of you will heard us speak about
My E6B, which is an app that you can get on your iPhone or Samsung or whatever you've got. You should be able to find a flight calculator app within the App Store. If you can't, I'm sure there's something online that will be able to give you your heading, ground speed and wind correction angle. But essentially,
just put a link in the chat for the E6B calculator.
Ah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Barney. Sorry, this is flipped the other way around.
We're seeing it correct way around.
Oh, are you? Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
We can read it.
I'm glad that's right then. Right. So in here, you've got a selection of boxes and you basically just fill in the information that you know to be true. So your course would be, so for the first leg, I've got 229. So that's 229 degrees. My wind direction for today is a northerly, so 0 we can go in there. And the wind speed, Barney has said, is 10k.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not 1, come on, 10. There you go, fantastic. And I'll then put in my true airspeed. Let's keep it easy with 50 for this example. And then we click done. That'll then spit out a few different numbers. But what we're really looking for here is our ground speed in kilometers per hour. Okay, so this has given me 56. So I'll write next to my leg 1, 56. I'll then
just do a pause there, Dan.
Yes, yeah.
So reality check. We know that if the wind's coming from the north to the south on that leg, we can just see visually that we're going mostly downwind. So we know that if we're planning and we know our mid-trim airspeed is 50 kilometers an hour, whatever number we're seeing out of that should be somewhere bigger than 50. If you're going dead downwind, it would be 60 in a 10 kilometer an hour wind because you're adding 10 kilometers an hour to your airspeed. As you rotate off that straight downwind, it's going to be getting closer to 50 at some point. Yeah, so 56, intuitively, you're about halfway around to 90 degrees perpendicular to the wind, and you're about halfway between your 50 airspeed and your 60 dead downwind. So you've got a kind of just common sense reality check that you haven't put your numbers into the calculator 180 degrees out of whack or whatever.
Let's just do that for let's just say 180 degrees in here and see what it says. There you go, 43 kilometers an hour if I'd put it in the opposite way around. So quite clearly you can see that like Barney's saying, you've got a bit of a tailwind, so you should be quicker than what your true airspeed is. And that true airspeed comes from going out and doing some test flights with your kit. The easiest way to get the airspeed for your glider is working out which way the wind is going up to a height of, say, around 1,000 feet, flying directly into wind, and then record your average speed if you've got something to record that. Any phone app, flight app will do that. And then turn around, go downwind, and then you can add the two together, divide by 2, and that will give you your average speed going into wind and downwind. You can repeat that test a few times to give you a more of an accurate result, and on different days and bits and pieces. Generally, they'll come out pretty much the same, but then you can average those. And then
you need to. Sorry, Dan, just say on that, if you're using a GPS, once you're in line and you're going straight and level, reset trip on the GPS and then look at the average speed readout. And the longer since you reset that trip, you fly on that leg, do a few kilometers, the more accurate that will be and account for adjustments in gusts and things. But crucially, don't touch your trimmers. Set your trimmers at whatever trim setting that you're measuring and leave them parked and try and fly as level as you can using the throttle while you're doing that. When you get to the end of that leg, note your average speed, turn around 180 degrees, get lined up. When you're going straight again, reset trip, then do the next average speed for roughly the same distance in the directly opposite direction to the first one, and do it on a map. Follow it a straight line on a map so you know you're really flying true. And you want to do that ideally at full slow trim full speed trim with speed bar, so the absolute top end of your speed range, and then 1 or 2 points in the middle to work out what's exactly your mid-range trim setting. Because the key to this task is when you're declaring it, you give yourself the maximum margin for error on your declaration if you plan to fly it at an airspeed that is bang in the middle of your trim range, and that including the range that you add with the speed bar, so that you've got the maximum possible adjustment either down or up if you've misjudged the wind or it's different from what it said on the ground, because it always will be. And I guarantee you that it will never be exactly what the weather forecast said when you fly it. And that's really where the skill in this task lies, is making the judgment where you need to adjust your trims up or down from mid-range to keep you coming in bang on the time that you've declared. Which is what Dan's now moving on to marking up as to how he works out whether he's moving too fast or not.
Yes. So yeah, like I was saying, I then go through the rest of my legs, and because you've already got your E6B calculator up, it's very easy to do that. You just have to change your course because you've already worked it out by checking all your other legs. So the next one will be 160, and then that'll give you 59 k an hour for that one. And then leg 3 is a little bit different, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So now we've got a couple of our speeds. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah, so we've got 56 for leg 1, 59 for leg 2. You'll have seen Barney also sent round a speed triangle, which hopefully you've printed out. If not, I'd advise doing that. I've got, let's zoom out a little bit. One printed out here. I've actually gone to the effort of fabloning mine because nothing's worse than dropping your speed triangle in a wet field and then it being turned into tissue paper, and then you're stuffed because you can't actually plan what speed you're doing. Not that that's ever happened to me, but
letting go of it in flight and seeing it go through the prop can be worse.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure that's pretty bad as well. But yeah, print these out. They'll last for quite a long time. As you can see, mine's fairly well used. And you can tend to see which sort of speed I fly at as well because it's stuck in one position. But they're very easy to use. Once you've done this calculation, move that out of the way, of 56, all we do is find 56 on this speed triangle, which is here. Fold that on the 56 line, and then you can line that up with your turn points and your track. So as we can see here, I'll just zoom back in again. That's the wrong way. There we go. As you can see there, we've got these lines that are vertical down. So I'm actually not on a full minute here. Can you see that? Yeah. So once we get to this second turn point here, I'm not actually on a full minute. But to make my life a little bit easier, I might just roll the triangle round to like the next speed up. So let's go for 57 and see if that brings us to a full minute, which it pretty much does there. It just makes my life a bit easier for working out timings. When you're in the air, you're flying to a full minute rather than 0.5 of a minute or something. It is these are, aren't they, Barney? So yeah, it just makes your life a lot easier. And actually 1 kilometre an hour different really isn't going to make much of a difference in terms of your trim settings and what you're actually flying. So now we're like happy with our speed. All that's left to do is take your marker pen, and then along this track, I'm just going to flip this around actually to make it a bit easier. I like to go on the outside of my route, but that's just me being pedantic rather than actually needing to do that. And essentially I'll start from here. I'll go, I'll put a dot at each line, so I'm not covering up too much information, and then I'll draw a line a bit further away from it, so I can actually navigate around this area and still see all the houses, and then actually have the line to see where things are. So this first line is 1 minute, second line is 2 minutes, 3 minutes, And then when we're at this first turn point, that will be 4 minutes. That works out to whatever 4 times 60 is. I should be at what, 240 seconds. So 240 seconds is what you'd write down on your declaration sheet. Something to make your life a little bit easier in the air as well is I like to circle the number of the turn point, so I know that's exactly the number I need to be turning up on. It's just making your life visually easier when you're flying things, and it's little things like that that you end up sort of refining over a few flights of doing these different tasks. But as I mentioned earlier, I extended this line a little bit further out. So it's the same thing again. You just line up this speed triangle, and then you draw a line out of where these are, and try and get your starting point on like a bit of a feature. So as you can see here, hopefully there's a bit of a junction in the road, so it gives me a nice starting point when I fly over that as well. So if you need to extend your line a little bit more, you can, but we start there at 0, 1, 2, 3, and then as you get to 4, you'll be at the start gate, but then you'll need to reset your stopwatches, so when you actually get on your course, you'll have the correct timings. But by the time you're at 4 minutes in, I would have thought you'd probably, with a bit of practice, be at your trim setting and be comfortable and settled in.
By that point, you should be able to just part. You shouldn't be touching the trims after that because you've tuned them right and you've got a good sense of it. And you've also got, because you might have to change them for the next legs, but you've got a good sense from that very first bit before you're in the time part as to whether your judgment of the wind was higher or lower, and if you're actually going to need to stay generally faster than your average speed, than your mid-range speed, or slower, depending on which direction you're going to the wind. I've done it many times. I would write just next to the start point, stopwatch in big capital letters, because it's very easy to go sailing over it and then realize that you're 4 minutes out all the way through and have to be doing a lot of mental arithmetic.
And tracker.
Yeah.
Just in case you haven't turned it on, but hopefully you will have done by that point. So yeah, literally it's just that. You go to your next leg and repeat really. So we've got 59 as our next speed. You take your triangle, roll it over to 59, and then let's see if we're lining up on a minute. We're not quite. So this one's a little bit slower. So actually, let's just do it. Yeah, we're at 57k there. So I can see that on this, you probably can't see it on there, where that first minute of that leg is, so it'll be minute 5, is actually a little house, which is a great indicator, which is exactly why I do the dot on the line and then the line out, because that you can still actually see the house, and then continue along, and then all we do is add on from this point. So this next one is 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and then 7 minutes there. So then just circle that one as 7 minutes.
So the other thing I'd be doing there, you've identified the house on minute 5.
Yeah.
When I'm at minute 3, I should be basically comfortable that I'm in position. I'm not touching the trimmers because the timing is all good. I've already seen the finish, the minute 4 turn point ahead of me, but I'm also then looking to my left, a kilometre away ahead, and identifying that house that I'm going to, as I come round the turn point, be immediately orientating myself towards. So I've pre-navigated it.
Happy 420. There you go. So then the same for the leg 3. And then we get to this curved section, which makes it a little bit more interesting. And the way I'd approach that, we're upside down here. But as you can see, just to backtrack a little bit, not that we're allowed to, but I will here, Barney. You can see that I'm writing my numbers in the direction of travel that I'm going, so it's easier to read. If you start doing it from square on to north, and you write your numbers along like this, you'd really struggle to see them as you're flying. So you're kind of rotating this and map around as you're marking on as you would be flying. So once we get to this curved section, we need to start treating it slightly different, because obviously with a curve, you're going to be facing different wind directions as you travel around that. So what I would do is I would break that into 3 straight-ish sections, as it were. So I'd sort of roughly look at where the curve's going to be, and I probably wouldn't draw these lines on my actual map, but you can anyway, just to give us an indicator of where we are. So if I would go from that turn point straight down to this first line that I've drawn across, you can see that we've got about 168 degrees. We go from that line, let's make sure it's square, and then we go across to this next line that we've drawn across that course. I'm at 212, and then from this third line that I've drawn, or second line that I've drawn across this route, breaking up this curve, you go to the end turn point, which is 245 by the looks of it. And essentially it's just repeating what you've done for the other ones in your E6B calculator to give you your actual speed. So if I punch those in real quick, so we've got 168 gives me 59 again, 212 gives me 57, and then 245 54. So same thing again, you would just take your triangle, go to 59 because that's our first section of that leg, and then you'd mark in there, and that's pretty much 1.5 minutes. We then move to 57. To do that little section there, and that's another roughly 1.5 minutes. So we're at 3 minutes by the time we get there, and then for the last section 54, fold this over for our last straight section, and that brings us up to a full minute actually, which works out quite nicely. So got one there, so 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so add all that up, and that gives us that. The other way of approaching that is by piloting it in the air. So you could choose a trim setting that's sort of average of these 3, and then just roll or work out what that is, and then kind of roll your triangle around and try and do it that way. But that does mean speeding up and slowing down as you're flying it, and it's probably not as accurate. So I think breaking it up into these sections is probably your best way about going around a curved declare, and that's kind of what I'd found's worked in the past, really.
Yeah, I would agree with your first way. John said there must be an app to calculate the triangle line integral around a curve. I'm sure there is. But the thing about this kind of piloting really is that, well, I believe the military say all plans go to shit the moment the first shot is fired. It's not really about planning out to the nth degree of accuracy on the ground and then sticking to that accuracy. It's about getting a near enough ballpark that you know you've got the adjustment in your trim range, and then using pilot skills to recognize whether you're up or down from that, feeling the wind in the air, seeing your drift on the ground, using these measured points in advance of it, and so on. So that you make in the air pilot skill adjustments rather than being a sort of a computer whiz or a heavy duty mathematician, geometry expert or trigonometry expert. Mike, your hands up.
Yeah, is there going to be any like kind of refresher on this or guidance for the Discovery
Yeah, I appreciate that this is a lot to take in,
Yeah.
in one.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we're giving you an overview now, so you've got something you can refer back to, you can practice a bit, but also during the comp. The idea of Discovery is that whilst we are scoring it to give you a flavour of competition, it's very much a friendly, and there is all the help available for anyone that wants it. So after each task briefing or every morning, there will be a session going on with a planning session for any of the particular tasks on that day. And I'd rather you plan them together, because you've all got different air speeds anyway, and the wind will be slightly different, so you will be making your own individual judgments in the air. The idea is I'd rather you all go off with a kind of a pre-plan that you've worked through with help from us and with each other, and then you, in the Discovery class, the philosophy really is learning to make the right judgments based on a relatively accurately marked map that you've had help with. In the Open Championship class, they'll be going off and hiding away in each of their tents and not letting anybody see what they're doing with their map planning, and checking out 8 different kinds of weather website to get the most accurate judgment they can make on what that wind actually is, and so on.
Don't know what you mean.
Mike.
Quick question there for Dan. You wrote down all your bearings in the beginning and jotted them down for the sake of the calculations, but
Yes.
when you're flying and you're making those turns, are you using a compass to bear in on those bearings as well, or are you just navigating on your map at that point?
Some people do, and some people find that handy. I've never actually done that for whatever reason. I've just actually found it's more faff to try and get yourself lined up on a bearing than it is to actually navigate visually. Sometimes you'll be turning downwind, and by the time you've looked at your compass and lined it up with your bearing beforehand, even when you're looking at that needle coming around to what should be then north, you'll be downwind quite a bit, and you'll probably be off track. So actually, I think the Mark 1 eyeball is pretty accurate. From my
I have never flown
experience
with a compass on my map deck ever in 15 years in any competition. I've never needed it. You mark your map properly on the ground before you go, and then you, so long as you're good at not getting lost. The only reason you should need a compass is actually if you're totally lost and you want to reorientate yourself to north. If you're confident you're not going to do that for these kind of tasks, you shouldn't need a compass on the deck.
Yeah. I've got a quick question, Dan.
Yep.
That plastic square thing you're using, what actually
Yep.
is it called?
This one says Fly GA. It's just an aeronautical compass, I think. It's just any compass should be able to give you a 360 bearing. You could actually use like a protractor, as long as you definitely made sure the 0 was at north and you went around 180 degrees. But yeah,
You probably get it from what, Pooley's or an aviation place like that.
If you go on Amazon, it's called Fly GA, and they're £7.97.
there you go.
Perfect.
Right.
Oh,
On
yeah.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Actually, think it might be an idea to make a bits and bobs kit list for like maybe for next year or something for newbies like me. I'm doing a lot of shopping.
I have put one together.
We do have one.
I do.
Although I realise it may be a little bit buried somewhere in our training.
You did put a list of stuff that we might want further up that chat.
Yeah, that would be the list of stuff, really. But that's like probably the total you need. If I zoom out, hang on 1 second.
I'm sure we do have a list somewhere on the website, but I'm not actually seeing it right now. So I will take a note point to find that and share. There is a much more extensive list of these sorts of things.
So what I've got here on this table is pretty much all you'd really need to fly the comp in its sort of smallest form. So I'll just go through. So you've got your speed triangle, pen and paper, markers like a CD marker for your map.
So a fine liner marker that will write over the Fablon.
Yeah.
Because all those marks you just made on that bit of paper, you will put them on top of the Fablon, because you might be rubbing them off. And if you decide not to fly that task that day after you planned it, you want to rub them off and put new ones on the next day.
Yeah. So highlighters, the compass to get your bearing. A ruler is always handy just to have as like a bit of a, just drawing lines on things. So you can see, for instance, I'll hold this up, hopefully you can see it. The airfield was here. As I flew to my first task, I drew a line directly from the airfield directly up to my task. So I'm always following a line to keep me as efficient as I possibly can be to maximize points. And actually on this square grid here of turn points, you can see where I'll have flown up here and I've marked in like kilometers and minutes how long it takes to fly around those 4. So as I come back from a task, I might be able to pick up, say, 1 or 2 more, or if I've got a bit more time, a 3rd one, and then get back into the airfield. So yeah, ruler's handy for that. Duct tape, some normal sellotape just for sticking your maps together. A bit of blue tack sometimes helps to hold them together as well while you're getting them lined up.
The 2-inch sellotape is quite useful as well.
Yes, yeah, I've got some bigger stuff we used in France, because they just give you a single map each time. But a applicator foam edged piece of plastic to help you put your Fablon on. And then I've also got a calculator because I'm shit at mental maths, basically. So it's always handy. And on the front there, actually, I believe it was Nigel printed these out. It was like minutes, and then how much that is in seconds. So you could quite actually see quickly what your minutes are for that. But I think we have shared this list of this stuff plus a bit extra, which will help you, like clicker for counting up turn points if you're really getting accurate and counting up how many turn points you've got on bits and pieces like that. But what I've got on this table here is pretty much, and obviously a mat board and a mug for your tea, is all you really need for flying the comp stuff. But I'd say your main important ones are your compass, your speed triangle, Fablon, and pens. Really, you could get away with most other stuff.
There's a wider range of things for more general flying, but for navigation specifically, that's
yes, yeah. Hope that helps.
All right. Shall we move on from that task type and just have a quick look at the others? That's the one that's the big.
That's the hardest one, isn't it? Yeah.
I'll share my screen again. Are you seeing my screen again now?
Yeah.
So the other one I gave you was a constant speed task. Now, the difference between that and the declared speed is obviously, okay, let's finish the declared speed. These scoring formulae do look more complex than the ones I used last year because of this normalization, but basically that says you've got your score relative to the best scoring pilot normalized to 1,000 for the scoring on that. But of that, 2/3 of the points come from your accuracy of time in seconds relative to the difference between your declaration and the speeds that the seconds that you arrive at. And then 1/3, so this is a ratio of 300 to 150, comes from hidden gates. If you miss any of the hidden gates because you've arrived early and you've gone off track to burn some time before coming in and you miss them. So that there is a point. The point there is that there is a point value to having your airspeed really true on the trims so that you don't need to suddenly go off track to get time. So that T is the difference between your estimated times and the actual times, and then the sum of those differences. So if you're 10 seconds out on the first one and 20 seconds out on the second one and 10 seconds out on the third one, and there's only 3 in the course, then that would be whatever I just said, 40 seconds would be T, and it's 300 minus T. So you would score 260 for that bit of it. If you're bang on to the second, and it's perfectly possible to do that if you get your timings right, you can be within a second or so of your declared time, then you'll get 300.
It's a good feel as well when you get that set bang on. Really,
yeah. Steve,
I take it. I'm making an assumption here, but I take it if you're flying a leg and you realise you're either behind schedule or ahead of schedule, that's when you would either get on the speed bar to try and make some time up, or pull the trims in to slow down a little bit, sort of thing.
Absolutely. Exactly. So, and that's really that the time to do that initially is that pre-flying before you've even gone over the first timing point. So you've got a really good sense. In the first notch, you expect to be there at 1 minute, and you're there at 50 seconds. You know, you need to slow yourself down a little bit for the next one, and then you're just up and down a little bit, so that by the time you're actually in the timed course, you're not touching your trimmers. And you should be able to not touch your trimmers all the way around from that point if you've used this speed triangle adjustment with the wind vector by that point, because you've adjusted for whatever difference the wind was to what you calculated for. You've then set your trimmers to take up that difference, and you should be able to then just go around the course without touching it. The reality is winds change, shifts a little bit, you get gusts, and you do still need to make active piloting decisions during the legs. But if it's absolutely nil wind, then you should be able to just park your trimmers and fly it, or absolutely dead steady wind. Okay, last one is precision navigation with constant speed. So the turn points do not use to score directly, but we will calculate from your time of arrival at the turn point how fast, if you're flying in that leg at an absolutely constant speed, you should have done it. So let's say first leg here, you come over here, you start, that's your timing starts at your nearest point to there, a bit more along here. And then you get past that one. So your nearest point to this turn point center here, if that is, let's say, 100 seconds, for the sake of simple argument, from that you took to fly that leg from there to there, then I know that if I put in a hidden gate here, and that hidden gate is, for the sake of argument, exactly 50% of the length along this leg, so that would be about there. Then if you're there at 100 seconds, I know you should be there at 50 seconds from crossing the start point. So we can calculate that back. You don't know where that gate is or where I'm doing it. You just need to fly each leg at as consistent a speed as possible. So again, it should be not touching your trimmers. And actually, it doesn't matter what setting you've got the trimmers on. You don't need to pre-navigate it. You need to know where your mid-range is, so that if you're getting gusts slowing you up or wind spinning during the leg, you can adjust. This is actually relatively easy to do on tasks where they're all in straight lines like this, because without the wind changing, you should be able to park the trimmers. The challenging ones are, for example, maybe I should have given you a different example on this. This one. I'm expecting you to do a constant ground speed for the entire leg. So if your wind direction is, let's say, you're flying straight into wind there. Let's put an arrow on that. That's your wind speed. So you would start this flying into wind. The further you come around this track, on this side, you're now flying directly downwind. But I'm looking for a constant ground speed. So you're going to be going into that on high speed, either full speed bar or at the upper end of your speed range. And as you move around this curve, you're going to be gradually slowing down your trimmers, so that at this point where you're going directly downwind, you're probably on full slow to make up so that your increments of travel are the same. Dan, do you want to? Probably better to do this on a curved one.
I actually have that one planned out from last year.
Well, why don't you go through that? I'll turn this off. Maybe I should have given you guys all that one as the best example.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because the first one you've actually given us, if this is a prime example of, let me just get this on the screen. It was the first task that I'd flown of the comp, and I'd planned to, and I planned it all out like I would do the declared task like we've been through. And as you can see on this map here, that I've got my timings on this leg. By the time I got to my first turn point, I was so far out that because it was straight legs and it was calm winds, I just scrapped all my timings and just flew it as straight and level as I possibly could because it was a calm day. And actually, I got full points on that task. So if they are straight legs, it goes to show that if it's a calm day, flying straight and level as you possibly can will actually pay you back in dividends. Then, so really,
give away that task. I won't have them so easy again.
But yeah, I know. This is what I'm worried about, Barney. Yeah. But it's good to challenge us. So that's. But yeah, what was I saying? Yeah.
Let's plan the constant speed one. I just
yes. So the circular one actually I planned as well. I didn't actually get time to do this one in the end, which I was a bit disappointed about because I flew 2 other tasks before it and then ran out of time, so I had to collect some turn points. As you can see, I've drawn lines here and here and here around to collect some other ones. But this is the constant speed here, isn't it? You can see most of that in shot. Can you? Might need to zoom out just a little bit more.
I suppose you can remember what wind speed and direction you were calculating for then.
I'll have a look and see what I've got written down. I end up scrawling all over this. Don't know if I do, mate. No.
Well, in a full circle task like that, it actually doesn't matter because you need to plan a ground speed that is bang in the middle of your trim range. So I'm guessing those increments that you've measured on that are the 50. What did you say? You fly at 50 kilometers an hour in the middle of your trim. 53.
A bit more than that now. I've changed wing, but yeah. Before it was.
So well, put your speed triangle onto that. Work out what was the.
I think 56. It would have been
56.
Yeah.
So you've got whatever the direction of the wind relative to the start point, you're basically doing a 360-degree rotation then. So at some point or other, you're going to need to be on full speed, and at another point, you're going to need to be on full slow. Yeah.
So essentially, I've done it pretty much like I did with the curve on the declared task. So you work out kind of in sections, probably like an octagon in this instance, and then you work out your speeds, or you could roll the 56k around your circle and mark it off. And actually, I think that's what I might have done at the time, crazily enough. But then, if you're in the top end, if you're in the middle of your speed range, you've got all of that to slow up and all of that to slow down. And if you've actually got timings to work from, you're able to do that. But it's a bit more on the seat of your pants, really.
It's pilot skill in the air again. It's all in your active speed adjustment on your trimmers.
Yeah,
and you've got to set it on that. Before I keep talking about kilometers an hour, probably quite a few of you used miles an hour instinctively when you're measuring distances. You need to get yourselves into the habit of kilometers because all of the maps are marked in kilometers and the Ordnance Survey map. So the standard OS grid is kilometers. Everything that we give you in terms of map distances, everything like that will be kilometers. So if you're all of the kind of rulers and guides and everything else are based on kilometers, and if you're intuitively thinking in miles, you're going to confuse yourself at some point or other. So I would switch to using kilometers for every reference that you do when you're flying, if you want to be serious about competition.
Does that go for wind speed as well, Barney?
Yes, because you're absolutely more importantly than anything, probably wind speed, because you're relating the wind speed to numbers of squares on a map that you're looking at when you're making in the air judgments.
What's good about the E6B calculator is if you've given it in miles per hour, you can still put it in, but then you can select what your output is as well. So there's that, but it does make your life a lot easier if you're in just one unit of measurement rather than old and new money, as it were. Yeah.
Right, so coming on, I'll give you a couple more examples. You've seen the one that was purely straight lines. That one was a mean one, but the others are somewhere in between. So in fact, that was an even meaner one. I was quite mean last year. I gave you one giveaway, but that one's not even a consistent circle. It's a whole load of different curves that still need to be constant speed. But I might also do a blend. So might equally well get something like this that has some straight legs and some curves as a constant speed. Point of note on that one, given that you're doing nearly 360 degrees, is that if the wind speed is more than half of your total trim range.
Can't see your screen, Barney, sorry.
Sorry, I forgot to share. Just pointing that out.
It's all right.
I was just saying, I've shown you that one. You may well get that sort of shape done in as a constant speed as well. So some curved, some straight, or you may get something like that that's not even a consistent circle. It's going up and down all over the place. But the key then is using your speed triangle and marking regular increments that you can keep working to with your stopwatch. Same thing there. Extend the line out, do a run up, mark up to start your stopwatch on the start line, because you will forget sooner or later. We've all done it.
It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
You're halfway down your first leg and you look down and they both say 0. Oh no.
And on these ones where you've just got one single timing or two timing points, you've got the start and the finish, I will have, say I've got a hidden gate, 25%, 50% and 75% of the length along the line. And I can measure that length very accurately with tools in Illustrator. And you get to that at 1,000 seconds. 500 seconds, you should be at the midway point, just up or down. So the scoring on them will be purely your time, which is 300 minus in calculated times from when you should have been at those turn points if you were flying the leg at constant ground speed. Any questions so far? I realise this is a lot to take in. We've been going for more than 2 hours now, so people's brains are probably starting to melt. I propose we just finish off with the last bit about what we call pure navigation, which is the turn point hunt, and a few pointers on that. And then we park the rest of it for maybe after the first briefing, when the other ones are sort of a bit more procedural. I mean, I'm happy to keep going as long as everyone has brain power, but I'm equally aware that we're going on quite a long time. So lots to talk about, lots to learn. In simple terms, pure navigation, turn point hunt. In and out of your distance from all these other tasks, there are turn points, and so you pick them up for bonuses. And over the course of the whole 3 days of the competition, the turn point hunt is valid, and you'll be picking them up and scoring them based on a total of A's, B's and C's are worth 1, 2 and 3 points, which are these distance out from the airfield, and the total number of turn points normalised to a multiplier of between 1,000 and 2,000, which I will judge depending on how much weather we get, how much flying we get. I will announce it on the first day of the competition, so you know before you go out and fly them quite how much relative to the other tasks the turn points we weighted. But the idea is that you, on your way out to fly class 9 here, for example, you would pick up 1, 2, 3, go in there, fly around that, then come pick up a few more on your way home, and then head back, or go on and do another task. So let's say I open the window at 0700 and I say you've got a 5-hour flying window this morning. It's up to you how much of that, and I will give you a window open time and a maximum air time. So I might say you have maximum air time this morning of 3 hours, and the window is open between 0700 and 1200. So you've got a kind of quite a big takeoff window that you can spread your flights around. You can choose to go on one short flight for an hour and a half, do this one, then come home again, have a bacon sarnie, go back out for another flight and do this one. Or if you've got 3 hours in one tank, then you can go straight out and do this navigation task, pick up some more turn points, go on and do this one, head home, picking up a few more turn points on the way, and do it all in one flight, which is more effective time in the air wise, because you're not going to wasting more of that time going into and out of the airfield. And those are the information that I'll give you on any particular day in the evening briefing before the next day, what my intention is in terms of hours flying and airtime, so that if you're doing map planning that night, you can have a good idea of what you're going to do, with the caveat that it may of course change the next morning. The key with the turn point hunt is I would get on your map board a series of pins with you've probably got them there, Dan, round-headed pins that you can jam in onto each of the turn points, onto the center feature, and then you can tie a fine string, paraglider cord is good for it, that you can pin on your start point, and then you can do all sorts of iterations, rewrapping that string around different turn point configurations to work out what kind of distance you're going to cover. And let's say I'm going for let's say I want to fly for 2 hours. It's one of the reasons I give you the length of these tracks. If I know my airspeed is 60 kilometers an hour, then I should be covering, on an average sort of general circular route in not too much wind, 120 kilometers in 2 hours, maybe a little bit less, 110. I'm going to lose 35 of those kilometers on that task, which means I know I've got another 70 odd in the bank to be going around turn points. So I will mark up my string of paracord with, in this case, 1 kilometer increments, so 15 millimeter chunks, which is this. Actually, you don't need to do it from the start. It's normally from like 50 kilometers up to 100. I've got length markers. There you go, Dan's showing you his length markers on a white cord. So I'll tie it off at 70 kilometers, and then I'll be working out the configurations in the quadrant of the map I'm planning on going to that day to get the best route around the extra turn points as the bonus points within the specific navigation task I'm trying to do. A few other tips on that. Don't waste time going for the low-hanging fruit nearest the airfield first. I would do exactly what Dan did and blast straight out on a straight line to the routes I'm trying to do, and save the near ones for extras. So if I know I'm actually getting back early and I'm within my 2 hours flight time that I've been allowed, I'll be getting back to the airfield with 10 or 15 minutes to spare. And I know I've got 10 minutes to go up and get this one, and then maybe even this one, to then come back in here. So I'm using every minute of that last time I've got allowed most effectively.
And also cross them off once you've flown over them, because then you can check as well once the scores come out that if you think you've hit one, and you have 1 point less, you can ask to see a track and make sure you've got it. Because actually last year it came down to the final 2 tasks of bowling landing was one point between me and Russ, was it, Barney? I think earlier in the comp I said, oh, well, it's only 1 point about one of my tasks or something like that. And actually 1 point can make a lot of difference.
And the other reason is, though, once you've crossed that turn point on day 1, it's then invalidated for the rest of the competition.
Yes.
So the other reason to cross it out and not waste time trying to get it again, because you won't score it again.
I normally put like T1 for Tuesday 1 or Thursday 1 or Wednesday 1 or whatever, just so I'd know when I've hit them and what the score should be.
The other thing that pilots like Dan spend the time doing, losing sleep, is staying up all night, going through any scores I've released very carefully against their own records of the tracks to make sure I haven't got anything wrong.
You're usually
Steve,
pretty accurate.
Steve, your hand's up.
Yeah, 2 questions kind of related to each other. The first one is for Dan. Over the entire competition, how many of the tasks did you get to fly?
Oh, that's a good question. I definitely didn't do them all. I did a fair amount, and Barney might actually have the score sheet there from last year, but that might be buried away somewhere. I definitely plan to do more than I flew. So I flew, I think, how many was there last year, Barney? 9 tasks, were there?
9, yeah. Nobody did all 9. I think the highest number was 7. I'm actually probably, I will tell you all now, going to not do quite as many this year. Yeah. Because I would rather than having a few pilots do each of them, I'd rather have more pilots do fewer of them, so we've got a more representative competition on the same task. So it will probably be more like 6 specific navigation tasks available as opposed to 9, but they may be longer in the specific length of them.
That ties into my second question. So for pilots like me that stay within sight of the airfield because I'm just a club pilot, are they going to be enough within sight of the airfield because you can only attempt them once?
Yes, and so what I will probably do is have a separate set specifically for club pilots that are very specifically within sight of the airfield. And for club pilot level, there will be, like I said, we have amalgamated club into overall discovery because we were sort of diluting things a bit by having them all too many separate classes. But we do recognise that at club level, you're not going to be necessarily able to go and do all the tasks even that the full discovery group can do. But you wouldn't necessarily even have the time to, because you'll probably be spending more time on the ground doing your planning, making sure that you've got all the kit set up, going through that sort of thing. So you will certainly get some flying. And Discovery last year all definitely got, I think, 1 of each task type flown. But yeah, you won't be able to go. We recognise the fact that you have to be within sight of the airfield, so we will make provision for that.
You're on mute, Andy.
We're looking for Andy.
I can't find the 9th task on here, Ben. Oh yeah, there is 9. I think
Andy Shaw looks like he's talking, but he's on mute.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm there. Sorry. So yeah, I've been speaking to techie staff, Steve, as well on this one about the inside of the surface, and I haven't got it 100% confirmed at the moment. We're going to look about the amount of members we've got there, but there's a coaching element that we're allowed to fly cross country if we're being coached. So at the moment, bear with me on it. I hope I've got some better news for you. So your 30-kilometre out and return to get pilot rating, for example, you know, it could be that that's part of your pilot tasks you're doing with a coach.
I think I only flew 4 out of the 9 tasks last year by the looks of it. But we did also do an FAI triangle economy task and also a pure economy task, and then plenty of spots and skills.
So what you're looking at now is my scoring system on the screen. You can see that. We've got declared speed, only Russell did that one. Snake, quite a lot of people did that. Low hanging fruit.
Easy peasy.
speed, only 2 people did that one. Nobody declared 2. Quite a lot of people.
A bit far out, wasn't it?
Constant speed, a few of you did that.
What's beautiful about the endurance format is because you can choose which tasks you fly. You're making a gamble guess on what the weather's going to do throughout the week. So if it looks calm towards the start of the week, but a bit rougher at the later end of the week, you can say, oh, okay, the calmer stuff, I might fly some of the harder tasks like the declared or the constant speed, and then save the snakes, which are a little bit easier for later on. But then you also run the risk of, if the weather then takes a turn for the worst, you've actually stressed yourself out by doing the harder tasks first, and then you might miss the easy tasks anyway. So it's a strategy game as much as it is as a pilot planning and flying them as well. So it adds another layer to the game, which keeps it quite interesting.
That's deliberately so, that it's more of this format and enables another level of pilot strategic planning, looking at your weather. Obviously, there are some unknowns in there as to when I will set things like the pure economy task. So that would be one where if it's not going to be thermic and I want a whole day's flying, I might well just say window opens at 0700, closes at 1800, and you've got 5 hours airtime for the Open Championship class. Off you go, and most people do a big one in the morning and a big one in the afternoon. Or I might say back by 12 and we'll do the refueling procedure for a pure economy in the afternoon, which was this one, or an FAI triangle, which is the other one, which we haven't gone through yet, and I'll park them. We won't do tonight. But to look at scoring, just to show you how the track analysis works, if this is what you're going to find. David Ayres scored it. No, it's not. I'm sorry. I need to rerun my Google Map Earth API. What you should be seeing here is a Google Earth view with the track over it and the track analysis that gives me.
I could have another go if you want, Barney.
There we go.
Ah, there you
are. Although this time it's not actually finding his track, but you can see on this task, these are the hidden gates we were looking for. It's telling me 10.8 not hit, start point not hit. I think it's not finding the actual tracks that it should have done.
I've got one loaded, but it depends if it's going to crash
You
again. I'll try here.
I should check this before we did this meeting.
Let's just do entire screen, share. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
You see this track log?
There we go.
Yeah, so this is just a snake that I set up at the boar chasers flying, and quite regularly I'll take a 10-point hunt and a snake task to flying. So this was the takeoff deck. John here had never flown any tasks before. He did have GPS on him. Regardless, he did a fantastic job, and he hit every single hidden gate. So this was the start gate, going over a church, and then heading on. The first hidden gate was over this farm building here. He's literally smashed straight through the center of that. Continued on. As you can see, he's navigated. He's gone these big buildings here, this crossroads here he's navigated to, and then the river. So quite big points. This one's a bit ambiguous. Probably wouldn't be in an actual comp because that could be anywhere really. Usually you'll find these
field. I would triangulate it in my positioning from various features and make sure it was pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've done here. But as you come around, you can see that we've got this water treatment plant here. It goes around the right of that and then comes around in the loop here, navigate around these what's it called, trees and hedges, and then this takes you past like a really nice sort of fishing lake, and then quite a nice court manor. So he's crossed through this gate as well, that's just north of the roundabout. But because our maps are so detailed, you'd be able to see that on a map that the line actually goes above the roundabout. So quite accurate. And he's come around here, and then yeah, basically this is sort of a good example of how.
If you click the run analysis, Dan.
Yeah.
So we've got this task set up, and we can say straight away that runs it. You can filter all those GPS fixes and stuff off, so we're not worried about them. But basically, start point, finish point, hidden gates.
Yeah.
And we very quickly look at that and say, right, he hit gates 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, missed number 6.
Well, he hit all of them, but my gate's the wrong way around on this one, so I had to manually work it out. Yeah, that's my fault rather than the pilot's. But yeah, he hit pretty much everything. One I set up the other day, I don't know whether it'll work, but let's see. Track analysis. Let's see if it might. Yeah, this is the problem I was getting the other day with. This is a gaggle track that didn't particularly like it, but if we run analysis on that, it should show that he's hit every hidden gate. So you can click down and see. Yeah, this outer edge is actually where he's come from, but yeah, for some reason
come in with a whole load of extraneous metadata that this thing
just doesn't like. Yeah, but that was from Gaggle though, so I don't know. It might be better. Well, it should be better from a Flymaster, but yes, it's essentially how it works. I don't think I've got any other tracks for these other guys. No.
I think we've covered all of the navigational aspects and the more general kind of safety overview of some of the things that affect the behaviour and so on. I think we'll probably draw it to a close there. It's been quite a heavy duty session as well.
Well done, everyone.
We haven't covered yet are the economy tasks, which wouldn't take as long, but there is still some strategy involved, and then the landing tasks. But they are more procedural stuff that I'll need to go through in the first briefings, and we'll make sure everyone on site is aware of kind of circuit patterns and that sort of thing. So we'll park them for first briefing, which is 2 weeks from today, same time. We'll say 8:30 p.m. And I will give you more of an overview of the equivalent sort of local airfield space around Manston with specifics of procedural routes, any local site issues, site safety, and then we can move on and cover the last bits of any task stuff. So on that note, does anybody have any burning questions they want to ask now? All brain dead.
Yeah. Well done, everyone. That's a lot of information to take on board. So, yeah.
I'll download this recording and I'll share it to the Comp's website, so you can go back over anything you want.
I take it everyone's taking like laptops to do research and stuff, not just using their phone. So is there places to charge up and use them?
Yeah, we will have power available to the main marquee and some outlets there that you can plug into, definitely.
Great. Smashing, look forward to it. And I thought it was a Wednesday start, but it seems like it's a Thursday start. It's a stupid question. I don't know how I got that.
It's Thursday, but the first briefing on site is Wednesday night.
Wednesday in the evening, yeah.
We'll allow pilots onto the site from Tuesday. So if you want to get there early and plan to do a bit of flying, familiarisation flights. The other procedural element on that is you may get to site, but nobody flies until you've had at least an initial briefing from me.
Yeah.
Trackers.
I can't get there. I can travel on Wednesday early. Is there, practice flying on the Wednesday as well? Yeah.
It's fine. Okay. So first briefing on.
Hope so.
The on-site briefing will be 9 p.m. I think I said on Wednesday, to give people who are coming after work that day time to get there. So you'll still have plenty of time in the early evening to do some flying.
Cool.
Yes, it's important to remind you guys as well, those that are on Discovery, with done a great job outlining the competition aspect this evening as well. I know it's already been said, but let's just remind you, don't put the phone down now and start thinking, shit, I can't do this. Don't turn up, because it's not a competition. It's briefings, coaching, debriefings. Let's do that again tomorrow, and you will be in awe with the pilots that are the best in the UK there, from Germany to Rick in the north to Dan in the middle to Barney. There's so much knowledge. You will just go, for the days that you're there, you will take so much in, which you'll take back to make yourself safer pilots. So please remember, don't worry about this competition scene at the moment. It's not a competition for the Discovery. There's no prizes in Discovery. You're all first and you're all last.
I've only just picked up a reflex wing yesterday and I haven't even flown it. So you're talking about trim speed. It's like I've only just got trims.
I took my map board up with me for the first time at the weekend, and Rick, I fly at Northern Skies. Rick gave me a really simple track to follow as my first attempt. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Just trying to navigate without GPS.
The nice thing about flying this way is that it gives you a sense of achievement on every flight. It quite quickly gets boring if you're just going up and knowing a GPS you can get home. But this gives every flight a purpose of making you a better pilot if you always follow a track.
Find yourself when you're lost as well. It's always good. I
got lost. I hit the last turn point and then I realised I didn't really know where I was, so I had to find my way back to the airfield, which was just looking at landmarks. It was good.
But you managed it because you're here. So
yeah, I did. Yeah.
The good thing about Kent is that we're right in the northeast corner of Kent. If you can't find your way back to the bit of Kent that we're in, navigating around from seeing Thames at one end, the whole of Kent, and Dungeness Point at the other end, then you really are lost. It's probably somewhere over Heathrow airspace.
Right. It's really useful. Yeah, really useful.
Good. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks very much. See you next.
See you guys. Thanks for your time.
Ask any more questions in the meanwhile on WhatsApp, and I'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
See ya.
Yeah. Cool.
See you all.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.